The assignment notice arrived on a Tuesday and Zara Chen felt nothing. She sat at her desk in the Galactic Administrative Center on Earth, rain pattering against the reinforced windows behind her, and read the official document projected on her screen. Kepler-7 Colony Administrator. 1-year contract, renewable, departure in 4 weeks. The colony's current status, critical. Her credentials, adequate. Zara was 38 years old, human, and entirely average. She had been promoted exactly twice in 15 years of administrative work. Her performance reviews used words like competent and reliable. Nobody had ever called her brilliant or innovative or inspiring. She made decent money, lived in a modest apartment in a modest building, and kept her emotional life the way she kept her files, organized, minimal, and without unnecessary complications. She had no family waiting for her return. She had no significant relationships that would suffer from her absence. She had no grand ambitions or unfulfilled dreams that kept her awake at night. When she read the assignment, she simply thought, well, that's what work is. She didn't feel fear or excitement or resignation. She felt the neutral acceptance of a person who had learned long ago that life was a series of obligations and tasks to be completed competently and without fuss. Commander Voss, her supervisor, had summoned her to his office before the official announcement. Voss was valiant, a member of a species known for logical precision and profound emotional restraint. He stood 7 feet tall, his scaled skin a muted gray-blue, his compound eyes reflecting her image as she entered. "You received notification," Voss said. "Not a question." "Yes, Commander. Kepler-7 has experienced significant administrative turnover." Voss gestured to a holographic display showing the colony's history. 9 administrators in 20 years. Each one lasted between 6 and 18 months before requesting reassignment. "Your predecessors found the situation untenable." Zara studied the data. Agricultural yield declines. Rising internal conflict indices. Worker satisfaction scores dropping steadily over the years. Population turnover at 60% annually. The colony had been established as a model of interspecies cooperation, humans, Keplerians, Venn, and Sorathi working together on agricultural development and resource management. According to the founding documents, it was meant to be a beacon of harmony in an otherwise fragmented galaxy. The data told a different story. "Why am I being assigned there?" Zara asked. Voss's mandibles clicked, a sound that indicated either appreciation or disdain. "With Valiant, the difference was impossible to discern. Because you will not cause further problems. You will maintain basic functionality until we determine whether the colony is worth salvaging or should be decommissioned. You have full administrative authority and will report quarterly. Do not escalate minor issues to this office. Do not request additional resources. Do not create new problems while solving old ones." Zara nodded. It was the closest thing to a vote of confidence she had ever received from Voss, which meant she was being sent somewhere to fail quietly and efficiently. That night, she began her research. She read every report filed by the previous administrators. She studied the Keplerian physiology and culture, learning that their agricultural traditions stretched back 8,000 years and were deeply connected to their spiritual practices. She examined the social hierarchies that had developed at the colony, noting which species occupied administrative positions and which handled labor. She read worker complaints, most of which went unanswered. She studied the administrative structures, which seemed designed to prevent people from making decisions rather than enabling them. Zara did not approach this research like someone gearing up for battle. She approached it like someone trying to understand what she was actually walking into. And what she found was not a crisis caused by incompetence or rebellion. It was a failure caused by systems that prevented understanding, cooperation that had been replaced by hierarchy, and people who had been hurt enough times to stop trying. For weeks later, she boarded the transport bound for Kepler-7. The colony's habitat structures were physically maintained but visually grim. Steel corridors, functional furniture, efficient lighting. The architecture of efficiency without any consideration for beauty, comfort, or the simple human need to feel welcome in a space. Zara's first impression was not of a colony on the verge of collapse, but of a place where people had simply learned to endure rather than flourish. She was escorted to the administrator's quarters, a small residential unit adjacent to the administrative center, by a Venn worker who introduced himself as Court and then said nothing else. The quarters were sparse: a bed, a desk, a small kitchen, a window looking out onto the colony's central courtyard. Zara unpacked her belongings, which consisted mainly of clothes, personal effects, and data tablets containing all her research. She had arrived at Kepler 7 on a Thursday evening. She would not enter the administrative center until the following Monday. Instead, she spent her first 3 days walking. She walked through the residential areas, noting how human quarters were separated from Keplerian districts, which were separated from the Sorathi settlements. She walked through the agricultural zones and observed the farming systems. She walked through the industrial areas. She ate in the common dining halls at different times of day, noticing which workers ate separately and which sat in isolated silence. She attended a work shift change and observed how little conversation occurred between different species. On Friday morning, she sat down in the main dining hall and simply asked people questions. "What's working here?" she asked a human technician named David, a middle-aged man with tired eyes who looked startled to be addressed directly by an administrator. David seemed uncertain whether this was a trap. When Zara said nothing else, just waited for an answer, he slowly began to talk. The water reclamation system worked well. The power distribution network was reliable. The medical facilities were adequate. And then when he seemed to run out of safe topics, he added quietly, "But everything else feels broken." "Can you explain what you mean?" David looked around as if the walls might be listening. In the old system, complaints to administrators resulted in reduced privileges. But Zara just waited, her expression unchanged, and so he told her. The work schedules made no sense. People weren't trusted to make decisions. The crop failures meant food rationing, which made people hungry and afraid. Different groups didn't work together. They worked in the same spaces without any actual cooperation. Nobody listened when problems were reported. Over the next 2 days, Zara had similar conversations with dozens of people. A Keplerian farmer explained that the human-imposed agricultural methods didn't work with Kepler 7's soil and climate. A Sorathi engineer described the frustration of having her suggestions ignored. A young human woman named Myra spoke in halting sentences about feeling worthless, about having arrived at the colony after personal failure and finding nothing here to rebuild herself with. A Venn maintenance worker explained that his species' daily rituals were impossible to perform under the current work schedule, forcing him to choose between his cultural identity and his job. Zara wrote everything down. On Monday morning, she entered the administrative center. The staff, numbering about 15 individuals from various species, seemed uncertain what to expect. They had seen 9 administrators before her. Some had been harsh. Some had been ineffectual. None had lasted very long. They looked at Zara, an ordinary-looking woman of medium height, with black hair in a simple braid and wearing standard administrative clothing, and they seemed to relax slightly. She did not look like someone who would make dramatic changes. "I'll be here every day," Zara said during her first staff meeting. "I want to understand how things work before I make any decisions about what needs to change. I'd appreciate if each of you could walk me through your department's operations. No criticism. I'm just trying to learn." This seemed reasonable to everyone. Over her first month, Zara made a single significant change. She held office hours in the common area every afternoon, sitting at a table with no barriers, available to anyone who wanted to speak with her about anything. She didn't call these meetings. She didn't require appointments. She simply sat at a table in the dining hall from 2 to 4 every afternoon and waited. The first day, only 3 people came. The second day, 5. By the end of the first week, she was speaking with 15 or 20 people daily. She listened to concerns, asked clarifying questions, and took notes. Most importantly, she wrote down every single name and issue raised. By the second week, something shifted. People realized that Zara actually wrote responses. If someone reported a problem, they would receive an answer, either explaining what could be done about it why it couldn't be done, or what steps needed to happen first. This sounds basic, but it was transformative. For 20 years, people had submitted concerns to a bureaucratic void and received nothing in return. Silence and indifference had become the default experience. Now, someone was actually responding. Zara's first major initiative came in her third week, after she had collected and analyzed approximately 200 individual concerns and issues. She created a formal suggestion system that was private, simple, and guaranteed a response. Anyone could submit an idea or problem. Within 3 working days, they would receive a written answer. The system was transparent. All approved suggestions were posted publicly so the whole colony could see that ideas were being taken seriously. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Suggestions poured in. Some were small. The lighting in the agricultural zone could be more efficient. Some were significant. The current administrative approval system was so cumbersome that it took 3 weeks to get permission to purchase supplies. Some revealed deep pain. The current work schedule made it impossible for Sorathi workers to perform their essential daily rituals. Zara began implementing changes. The Sorathi scheduling issue was resolved within days. The work schedule was reorganized to accommodate their ritual requirements, which took approximately 30 minutes each morning. When Zara announced the change, a middle-aged Sorathi named Kesh approached her in the dining hall, and for the first time in the colony's history, a Sorathi worker openly wept with gratitude to a human administrator. Nobody had considered their cultural needs important enough to modify systems for before. The agricultural system was next. Dr. Sarah Morrison, the colony's lead agronomist, had submitted a request in the suggestion system asking if she could study Keplerian farming methods with their cooperation, rather than simply imposing human agricultural protocols. Zara not only approved, but also created a new position, Agricultural Integration Specialist. Sarah, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a brilliant mind, became the first human administrator to take Keplerian farming seriously. Zara attended the first collaborative meeting between Sarah and the Keplerian farmers. She said nothing. She simply observed as Sarah asked questions and listened. The lead Keplerian farmer, an elderly male named Torvin, spoke with obvious emotion about his species' agricultural traditions. He explained how his people had adapted their methods to Kepler-7's environment over generations. He described how the human system violated the soil's natural cycles, which was why crops were failing. "Why didn't previous administrators listen to this?" Sarah asked, genuine sadness in her voice. "Because we did not believe humans thought of us as people," Torvin said simply. "We thought to you we were workers, problems to manage, not minds to learn from." Sarah looked stricken. She turned to Zara. "We need to completely redesign the agricultural approach." "Then that's what we'll do," Zara said. Over the next 3 months, Sarah and Torvin worked together to create a hybrid system that incorporated Keplerian traditional methods with human equipment optimization. The results were extraordinary. Crop yields increased by 40%, and more importantly, humans and Keplerians began working together as colleagues rather than administrator and labor. Knowledge flowed both directions. Some human workers learned Keplerian techniques. Some Keplerians learned human equipment maintenance. The simple act of treating people as experts in their own traditions transformed the working relationships. Zara made another significant change. She eliminated unnecessary administrative layers and restrictions. She met with department heads from all species and asked, "What permissions are you waiting for that you shouldn't have to ask?" The answer was almost always, almost everything. She created a trust-based system where people within their departments had authority to make decisions without seeking approval for routine matters. This required better training and clearer guidelines, which Zara invested in heavily. Mistakes happened, but Zara's response was never punishment. It was to understand what went wrong and help the person learn. By the 6-month mark, something fundamental had shifted in the colony's atmosphere. Zara established a community workshop in the center of the colony, a shared space with tools, materials, and tables where people from all departments could work on personal projects, repairs, or learning new skills. It was simple and inexpensive. It was also transformative. The workshop became the social heart of the colony. A human fixed a Ven's water pipe, and they discovered a shared interest in engineering. A Keplerian taught a Sorathi child how to work with native clay. A young engineer named Treth, whom Zara had encouraged to submit his suggestion for improved water filtration, was implementing his design with a human colleague named Marcus, and the two had become friends through the process. Zara watched a young woman named Myra, the same woman who had spoken about feeling worthless during those first conversations, help another new arrival understand how the workshop operated. Myra was teaching. Myra was confident. Myra had found a place to rebuild herself through creative work and community acceptance. Zara did not create these connections. She simply removed the barriers that prevented them. But not everyone welcomed the changes. 6 months into her tenure, there was an incident. 2 workers, a human named James and a Keplerian named Vort, got into a heated argument over resource allocation in the agricultural zone. The argument escalated into physical conflict. Both men were injured. The colony held its breath, waiting for severe punishment. The old system would have mandated suspension or reassignment. All the old fears returned. The colony wasn't transformed. Change was fragile. Humans and Keplerians couldn't actually coexist. Instead, Zara did something different. She required both men to attend mediation sessions together, but she also investigated the actual source of conflict. What she discovered was that the resource allocation system was confusing and poorly communicated. Both workers had felt disrespected by the other's department. Zara fixed the system, ensured both workers received training on the new protocols, and then brought them both together, not to force an apology, but to explain what had actually happened. They discovered that their conflict wasn't rooted in mutual hatred or species prejudice. It was rooted in miscommunication and a system that didn't provide clear guidance. Both men apologized to each other, not because Zara forced them to, because they actually understood now. This incident became a turning point. People saw that conflicts could be resolved through understanding rather than punishment. The idea spread that the colony's problems weren't inevitable. They were solvable through communication and systems thinking. By Zara's second year, the changes had become undeniable. Agricultural output exceeded projections by 35%. Staff turnover dropped from 60% annually to 8%. Workers from other colonies requested to transfer to Kepler 7. The waiting list to join the colony grew longer every month. Worker satisfaction scores, measured through voluntary surveys, increased by 70%. 4 other colonies requested copies of Zara's administrative model. Commander Voss arrived for his annual review and seemed almost confused by what he found. The habitat buzzed with purpose. Different species worked side by side. The agricultural yields were exceptional. The reports were thorough and honest. When Voss spoke with workers from various departments, they mentioned Zara not with forced enthusiasm but with genuine respect. A Keplerian farmer told him, "She listened to us when no one else would." A human maintenance worker said, "She gave me a chance to be more than just a worker." Voss reviewed the data with his characteristic logical precision. Everything was objectively better. The colony was functioning at unprecedented efficiency levels, not through coercion but through engagement and cooperation. "I'm offering you a promotion," Voss said to Zara. "Oversight of 3 colonies, or a position in central administration. You've proven you can manage this colony. That's a valuable skill." Zara listened to the offer. She considered it carefully. Promotion meant advancement, status, power. Everything she had never had in her career. Everything that people were supposed to want. "May I have time to think about it?" she asked. Voss's mandibles clicked. 3 days. That evening, Zara walked through the colony she had spent 2.5 years building. She walked through the community workshop and watched Treth and Marcus working on a new irrigation system modification, with a Sorathi engineer contributing calculations. She walked past the agricultural zones and saw Sarah and Torvin examining crop samples together, speaking in low voices about hybrid cultivation techniques. She sat in the dining hall and watched Myra teaching a group of young Keplerians about human literary traditions while they taught her about their history. She stopped at the administrative center and looked at her small, accessible office. She had intentionally kept it minimal and open. People could walk in without appointment, without fear, without the formal barriers of hierarchy. None of this had existed 2.5 years ago, not because it required genius, but because it required someone willing to listen, willing to be present, willing to believe that ordinary people could contribute extraordinary things if given the chance. Zara returned to her quarters and composed her response. She declined the promotion. She told Voss that Kepler-7 wasn't finished, it was just beginning. Real change took time. She had learned that the work of building community, establishing trust, and creating systems where people actually thrived wasn't something you completed and moved on from. It required presence, continuity, commitment. She asked for a 3-year extension. Voss was silent for a long moment. Most people clamored for advancement. Valiant logic could not compute why someone would choose to remain in a lower position when promotion was offered. But he approved her request. 3 days later, Treth came to Zara's office and presented her with a small sculpture. It was carved from native Kepler-7 stone by a Sorathi craftsperson. The sculpture depicted figures of different species, human, Keplerian, Ven, and Sorathi, working together. "We wanted you to know," Treth said, "that you changed our colony, but more than that, you changed how we see each other, and that changes everything." Zara looked at the sculpture and felt something shift in her understanding of who she was and what humans represented in a galaxy of advanced species. Humans don't have special powers or unique intellectual capabilities that make them exceptional compared to other species. Humans have the ability to see potential in people that other civilizations have learned to overlook. Humans form attachments and build communities not as weakness but as strength. Humans are willing to be present and patient when more efficient systems could technically work without that presence. These qualities, consistency, empathy, genuine interest in others, refusal to give up on people, might be exactly what the galaxy needed as it grew more advanced and more isolated. That evening, Zara walked through the colony at sunset. She was still quiet and practical. She was still unremarkable in appearance and manner. She was still just an ordinary human woman doing ordinary work. But everywhere she walked, people acknowledged her not with formality, but with genuine warmth. A young Keplerian called her by name. A human worker asked her opinion on an agricultural question. A Sorathi paused her work to smile at Zara as she passed. The colony thrived not because Zara was exceptional. It thrived because she believed that ordinary, consistent effort and genuine care for others could transform a broken place. And she was right. In a galaxy of extraordinary beings with extraordinary powers and capabilities, humanity's greatest strength had turned out to be something simple: the capacity to show up and do the work, the willingness to listen, the refusal to give up on people. And on Kepler-7, that was enough.